Welcome to another episode of Conversations. My name is Dr. Naomi Blemur, and I am your host. When an environmental and humanitarian crisis happens in Haiti, its effects are felt first by those living in Haiti. Its aftershocks are then felt by Haitians around the globe. For nearly 100 years, the diaspora have managed to create different forms of organizations on their own to help Haiti. And foreign organizations have also provided aid. The floodgates opened up in the 1980s. The act of goodwill consequently turned Haiti into the Republic of NGOs. That's according to a Wall Street Journal report. Perhaps as many as 10,000. The NGOs range from international giants such as Save the Children, Catholic Relief Services, and Médecins Sans Frontières, also known in English as Doctors Without Borders, to a plethora of U.S. evangelical churches that help one school or one Haitian church at a time. With so many groups, how can Haitians, particularly the diaspora, collectively support an organization to ensure significant aid is provided and at the same time to stop a dependency on aid? We must understand that those groups are not accountable to any local or national government or even their donors. A simple photo op will suffice. Is accountability a problem? Yes. Can charity be beneficial? Yes. Can it be detrimental? Yes. Does Haiti's dependency on aid create an environment for opportunists? Yes. Can aid groups be trusted? Well, only with accountability. Our guest today will share her expertise on how to trust in an environment of distrust. She will also inform us of one alternative in terms of aid. Here today with me is Dr. Guerda Nicolas. Welcome, Dr. Nicolas. Dr. Guerda is professor in the Education and Psychological Studies Department of University of Miami, School of Education and Human Development, Secretary General of the Caribbean Alliance of National Psychological Association, Chairwoman for Haitian American Professional Coalition, HAPSI, and co-founder of Ayiti Community Trust. And thank you for being here. Nous croyons que vous avez pile dans Jakoutou.
Oui.
Et vous vraiment parler aider nous comprendre situation ça.
My pleasure.
And we're going to get right into it. If too much charity isn't sustainable long-term, what is?
Well, first of all, let me just say about charities, right? Because we come from a country, which I think is really important to situate for myself always, right? Because when I think about charities, I think about humanity, right? In terms of how we as individuals, as people, respond to others in terms of a human way. So sometimes we think of the word charity as a bad thing, right? But there's an aspect of it is just human. That when certain things happen, there's a disaster happen, something is happening in New Orleans, flood is happening in New York, you humanly want to respond, right? And sometimes that falls into charity, right? But for us as Haitians, we come from a country that always responded to others, right, that were in need. So that's why we created the Repiblik of Haiti, where anybody who is not free can come to a country that would say, you are free, right? And so one would say, well, that's a form of charity, right? That you absolutely are creating spaces and allowing others to know that I too want to give you a hand, right? To be able to have a place where you can call home. And so we come from that as a culture, as a people, as Haitian people. I said, we are the most philanthropic, giving, charitable folks I know, because that is embedded in who we are in terms of our humanity. The distinction between when I'm doing for the goodness of humanity and I'm doing something for you in response to whatever's going on in life, but I don't have any bone, any gain from me in it. See that distinction? So there's a difference between when I give you something with the expectation that something else is gonna feed me from it. So if I give you a couple of dollars because you're in need of it and I'm providing that charity, and it feeds my ego and it feeds my sense of self and it feeds me in a certain way, that's the balance, right, that we're trying to strike in terms of charity. So we don't want to say to people that you don't want to be charitable, because it's just not human not to want to respond. Right? But when I react and I respond because I need to feed something in myself, then that's a different kind of charity, because then I'm expecting something good, so that good feeling that I have to come from it, right?
I want to feel good about it.
I want to feel good about it. And so the moment you feel good about it, and that's the part of it that really is important for us to pay attention to, because if in fact you're in need of something and I feel bad and I want to feel better about how I'm feeling guilty, I'm feeling all kinds of way because of this, the moment I give you something, I feel better. And because I feel better, I'm not thinking about you anymore, right? Because that feeling is gone now, right? Versus if I'm able to sit with that uncomfortableness and try to figure out, what is Naomi really want? Right? Not the thing I'm going to do to feed me, but what is it that Naomi is asking of me at this particular time? And that allows me not to show up to Naomi with a bowl of soup when Naomi pas besoin soup là. Ouais? L'été déjà gen assez soup. It's the last thing she wanted was soup, but I made soup because it was what I did to make me feel like I was going to do something for Naomi. It's that distinction. So we have to be able to think a little bit about, how do I ensure that I'm doing for others, but it's not doing for others so that I can heal, so I can feed my emotions, so I can deal with what I'm experiencing, but I'm doing something in response to the others. Once we do that, once you're able to be at that space, then now you're thinking that your charity is not a one-time thing, that you might be thinking that this must be much more long-term. It could be that I want to be responsive to Naomi, but maybe Naomi doesn't need me now because Naomi has enough people making her soup. So maybe when Naomi is going to need me, it's going to be in 3 months. It's going to be in 6 months. So that, for me to do that, it means I have to sit with that sense of like guilt and uncomfortableness and all of that I'm having, in order for me to come back in 6 months and say, now, how can I be of help to you? How can I be of service to you? And so I say all of that. I know you asked a very simple question about charity, and here I am all over the place.
But we're here to dig deeper, so let's dig.
Right? And that's what conversation we're having, right? So, but it means that we don't want people to hear the word charity and say, oh, that's bad. We don't want to be charitable, right? It's about how you can be charitable, right? And how can you be charitable in a way that A, doesn't feed you because you're responding to be fed, or B, but you're charitable in a way that promotes humanity and that promotes dignity, right? In the same way. So that's the process, I think, for all of us in the midst of like terrible things that are happening in the world, and our needs to want to be sort of charitable, right? And there are people who are, I think of like you and other people in our community that gives of our time and our resources and so forth. We don't want to say that's bad, right? In that sense, but it's the process by how we do it. It's the method and the strategy that we are using in terms of the charity that we really need to work on.
Wow. Dr. G, you obtained your doctoral degree in clinical psychology from Boston University and went on to complete a pre-doctoral training at Columbia University Medical Center and a postdoctoral training at New York State Psychiatric Institute, Columbia University's Department of Child Psychiatry. Your specific research is on Haitians.
Yeah.
How's the well-being of Haitians in Haiti and the diaspora after a presidential assassination and now another earthquake?
Well, you can just imagine, right? And so, and it oftentimes people think of like this disaster and assassination. And I keep saying to people, let's go way back, right? Like, let's go really way back, because if we focus on this earthquake disaster, this assassination, then we lose sight of the other assassinations that also took place in this country. We lose sight of all the other disasters that also were taking place in this country. We lose sight of what happened during slavery time in this country. So it is important for us to put all of this in a context of what I call complex, right? Complex trauma. So if we're talking about complex trauma, it's going to be hard for you to walk around and say, well, how are you doing today, Guerda? Et puis, je dis, oh, mon forme. C'est ça, nous tout dit, oui. Moi, Naomi Jean, Naomi dit, oh, très bien, mon forme, oui. Mais est-ce qu'on est vraiment en forme? Est-ce qu'on est vraiment en forme, right? But we're not a part of a society where I can't say, m'pas en forme, right? But it is clear that when you have all of these experiences that have happened in this country, and you've had just in the last 8 months, let's just say, you have insecurity, kidnapping, right? So forth. And somebody sees you and they say, how are you? And you're like, bien, en forme.
En forme.
Ah, bon, ça, bon, if we're going to really have a conversation, let's just be real about that. Moi-même, moi, toujours dit, tout le monde est meilleur comme un psychologue, m'a dit. Moi-même, job, moi, c'est pour m'assurer que nous tous dit tout le monde, que nous tous fous, nous tous pas en forme. Si nous tous là, nous qu'a dit ça, m'pas quoi qu'on monde pral gon problème, l'on dit m'pas en forme. What I do? Because it's going to be clear that you're not okay. So, as an example, last year, during the whole Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, all of that was happening, and people were now so racially focused in terms of racial justice. I showed up in all my Zoom and people said, how are you? I said, not good. They're like, oh, not good, sak passe. I said, the black man just got murdered on national, like in front of everybody. How could I be okay about that, right? So it is okay for us to recognize that it's okay not to be okay, right? Because we are living in situations where there's a lot of different issues going on. So how can we expect people to be okay, right? Because the situation that's happening, the fact that you can wake up on a Saturday morning and the earth shook, that's not normal. Your reaction to that is normal. Right? And so we need to really engage more of that. We need to be able to allow people to talk about what is it that they're not okay with. And so I look for the person when I say, how are you? They're like, Babon, même Dr. G, Babon, no, Babon dit, bon. I'm much more like focused on that than the person who's saying, I'm okay, right? Because I'm just saying I'm okay because the question becomes so like trite, right? That is just like what we ask everybody. How are you? But we don't necessarily mean, how are you really? And then pause to really answer to the question, to get an answer to the question in terms of how am I really doing? And so one of the things that I think that I saw, as you know, I was in Haiti during the time of the earthquake, that I think to be able to walk around and hear people's stories, and hear not just the earthquake stories, but it's to hear years of stories, right, that are embedded in what just happened, in last month in August and so forth. So all of that forces all of us, right, to understand the social conditions and how that relates to one's mental health, economic, how that's related to one's mental health, one's, housing, how that relates to your mental health, your education, how that's related to your well-being. So the answer to the question that you're asking, which is, how is the well-being of our people, right, both in the country as well as here, requires us to take a look at the layering of the factors that contribute to one's well-being.
And Dr. G, what are some of the stories? What did you hear?
Yeah, so I had an opportunity to, I was listening to this woman when I was there. As you know, my work focused a lot on the rural community. And so the mountains is where I belong, all the time. And this woman had lost her 3-month-old child, right? So she's telling me the story of how her 3-month-old was inside the house, right? She stepped out, right, for a moment, and she noticed that her sister's house, they live right next to each other, comme on la cour, mais Sky Surly, mais Kylie, et puis il sorti de yo pour la font petit café, on bail comme ça, et puis li ouais Sky Surly là, a bail secouer, et puis li essaie pour ouais qui ça le café à propos de seul. En attendant que la garde seul là, il pas ouais Sky parler. Ça t'a passé en bas Sky parler. Puis il a essayé courir pour la louer ça qui passé dans Sky. Mais quand elle était déjà tombée, il perdit ni petite lia, il perdit petite lit, il perdit seul dans moment ça, right? En même temps, la bonne histoire ça, she's telling me the story about what has happened. She's also very much mindful of all of the other experiences that she's had, right? Between trying to build home, doing mature, and then that fall. Trying to find a job in Port-au-Prince, going to Port-au-Prince to trying to find a job from where she is. And we're talking in a town called Lièvre in the department of NIP, for those of us who knows the departments, right? Very well there. And so this experience becomes compounded with a lot of other life experiences where it's clear that life hasn't been fair to me, right? In the same token, right? And so forth. And as she's also telling me all of that, and it's like clear that she's managing tout bagay qui était passé dans la vie.
Après revivre.
Oui. Et puis en même temps, ou tande li, et puis li dit, OK, et qui l'a retourné là, parce que moi, après, font petit cassave pour, et puis l'a retourné pour qu'elle joue un petit cassave ça veut dire que, dans le même moment que la passé toute, la traversé toute route ça yo, la pensée de futur, la pensée de qui ça, et puis la pensée de l'autre monde en même temps. Ça veut dire que,
charité, la qualité.
Many. Aspect de l'humanité.
Même qui l'a retourné.
Exactly. Et qui ça fait pour. Exactement. Ouais. Et en même temps, lui montrer moi, comme on, dans le domaine PAM, comme un psychologue, que she's thinking about tomorrow.
Ouais.
And that's also important. Okay. Because that means in her mind, there is a tomorrow. Right? Which is really is important.
Dr. G, in the book written by you and Gregory Costable, The Psychological Consequences of Extreme Poverty in Haiti, you made it clear that something must be done now to eradicate poverty in Haiti. Does this need still exist?
Oh, God, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. When we wrote the book, right, a number of years ago, that is based on research that we had done specifically to go to the rural communities, right? And I believe very strongly that our future, our culture, our history, it all belongs in these communities. And I'll come back to that in a minute because our whole foundation is based on this model overall. But when you look to see that level of extreme poverty, right, and not addressing that level of poverty doesn't allow for the development that we're looking for in a society, right? And so how is it okay for our brothers and sisters to be living in non tikai, en dans tikai ça, qui fait avec un petit bois, qui fait, ouais, mais son aspect de fierté parce que yo même arrivé dans niveau ça.
Right? So you get to it.
Because and they build it for themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I want to be very clear that level of proudness when you meet somebody who's able to build your own home, no matter what your home looks like, there's a level of just like pride, that you have, that you did that, right? And so forth. And at the same time, we can't say that's acceptable, right, for everyone to be able to be living in those conditions. And we don't pay attention to extreme level of poverty and the impact that can have on one's psyche. What kind of impact does it have from an economic development? What impact does it have from a health perspective, and so forth and so on. And so we wanted to ensure that we were shedding light, because people talk about Haiti as being poor. There is poor, and then there's extreme poverty, right? And not paying attention to that level of poverty didn't give prudence to the conversation that we were having around the sort of the need for economic development in the country. And so that really was the whole point of the work. Congratulate Gregory for really taking the time, because we really took the time to go to each community to meet with people, ask them questions, listen to their live stories, and and so forth, so that way we can have a book that would integrate their voices right in there. And as you're hearing it, there's the part around what will tomorrow look like and how tomorrow can be better. And then there's a sense of pride that also exists there. And that's important for us to pay attention to, even more so today, because it means that if in fact I'm able to take a look at the paysan qui construit tikay li ya, lem vini avec un bagay qui semblait li pi belle qui sorte gen, ça veut dire que kounya c'est comme sous nous
en compétition.
Et c'est pas seulement compétition. I'm elevating you one step up, right? But one of the things we saw in the midst of this earthquake, that one step up elevation did not mean those homes stayed up, right? And so at the same time, we may not be building in a way that is doable, in a way that's going to be sustainable, because at the end, we can say, mais ça, gade ki yon ti kay sa te la, et puis gade so jwen kounya, gadon différence entre deux ti kay sa yo, mais est-ce que yon différent si gon gros tremblement de terre qui va venir? Pas vraiment. Really? Donc, ça veut dire que j'en nous pense de l'aspect pauvreté, the way we think in our own mindset of this level of poverty is important, right, to pay attention to, because it allows us to think about what is it how we're contributing to a much more doable and sustainable.
On parlait des différences entre pauvreté extrême and just being poor.
Yeah.
What are the key things that we're looking at here?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So if you think about to me, when you look at this general poverty, right? And so that we're talking about what maybe a good comparison might be. Like in the United States, in the state of Florida, the poverty level is for you to be considered poor is about $15,000 and something change. I don't know how they came up with the change, but it's about $15,000. And if you are above $15,000 or so, you're considered to be poor, right? No, overall. But if I make $15,000, let's say I make just 1 cent above it, I'm no longer considered to be poor, right? But I'm a mother of 4 kids or 2 kids, right? And with rent and so forth and so on. So we might say, well, that's poor, right? Overall. But there's a difference between that same person that is at the 15,000 level, right? That also has not only their kids, but they have parents to also manage. They have family back home, right? Because we're talking about immigrant communities. L'autre responsabilité qui vient entrer là-dedans. Ouais, ça veut dire que c'est pas seulement garder pour qui ça moun nan gen kounya, mais c'est pour garder tout contexte là. À propos de ça c'est une. Deuxième aspect, c'est que gen on ka di dans moment ça, à ce moment, moi me sentim dans espace ça nous relè pauvreté a. Mais gon espoir
demain.
Ouais, c'est que j'aime lié kounya. Mais si je ne travaille, si je n'ai tel bagay, ça veut dire que
ça nous relève opportunity.
There's a roadmap. There's a possibility of being able to get out of that. So the question is, when you get to the level of extreme poverty, you're talking about generational, right? That doesn't have that same pathways that you can't see. It's not that moun sa, dame sa pral jwen tel bagay demain ki pral retire nan situation sa. And that's important because it allows us to know that from a societal standpoint, from a system perspective, we have a responsibility to be working towards changing that, even though that particular individual may not have the opportunity to do so, right?
Il est clair que en Haiti, this is the state for many people.
Yeah, the level of extreme poverty is real. The level of extreme poverty is real. We hate the word. I hate the word when everybody refers to Haiti as the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. We know how we all feel about that. But and at the same time, we have to be real that there's a level of poverty. There's extreme poverty in this country that requires attention, and that attention, to me, is what we're talking about in terms of development, in terms of sustainable. That's not just coming and feeding somebody today, right? Because that's not going to address extreme poverty in a society. It feeds me today, but really thinking about the future is really, really key.
And ultimately teaching them how to fish.
Yeah. But one of the things that I see that, with that phrase is that people say all the time, we really need to spend more time teaching Haitians how to fish. When you're there, okay, Naomi, really,
so they know how to fish.
They already know how to fish. The thing about it is I don't have the right equipment to go fishing. Parce que nous avons une différence entre ça. That there's a huge difference between, do you need to teach me how to fish? And there are people who need to be taught how to fish.
And there are people that
and
need
there are
equipment.
people who are good fishers. Oh, good fisherwomen and fishermen, who can absolutely get you the very best fishes that you need from the ocean, but they don't have the right equipment to be able to do so. And knowing that distinction is really, really important.
And how do we as the diaspora learn to bring those type of assessments? Because that's really the key here.
Yeah, absolutely. But part of it is that you have to already come with the mindset that these particular individuals are not looking for you to teach them, for you to teach them how to fish. Right? And so if
you have to discover.
So you already have to come, like, say, if I'm coming in and I'm saying, I'm here to teach Naomi how to fish, then I already came with my lesson already, and I came with all my stuff, and I'm ready to teach you on how to fish. But I didn't really take the time to actually listen to you and to really understand what are the assets, what are the resources, what is it that you already know, and how can I accompany you and on the path that you want to be able to go to. And that moment of taking the time to really listen to people, so that way you can understand where is the best point of intervention for you at this particular moment, versus bringing something that doesn't meet the person, where they're at. Yeah.
Dr. G, this is an excellent segue into Ayiti Community Trust. Many people don't understand this particular type of organization that you co-founded. Help us to understand how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ayiti Community Trust is a community foundation, just like Miami Foundation, like toute l'autre fondation, right?
Son
fondation liée, c'est vraiment important parce que nous-mêmes nous pas dans fait projet, right? C'est vraiment important. Ayiti Community Trust is built on a theory of change that believes that the development of Haiti requires decentralization. It requires a focus on the 571 sections communales qui nan pays. That is our focus as a foundation. So as such, we believe that accompanying grassroots organizations in these communities, right, who have already the human resources, because nous connaissons ça bien, richesse nous ça c'est moun yo. Right? The Haitian people is a huge asset, in this country. And so how do we accompany them to really, to do what they want to do in terms of their own development and moving forward? And so Pierre and I created this foundation after literally 15 years of doing nothing but doing research, not only 15 ans, pas seulement dans le pays, d'aller dans le bon l'autre côté, d'aller dans Saint-Croix, Virgin Island, tout, dans le garder fondation là, dans le Brésil pour nous le garder, dans le Puerto Rico pour nous le garder, d'aller en Afrique pour nous le garder, pour nous, qui gens nous a construit une fondation, qui a accompagné section rurale ça yo, non façon qui utiliser ressources que moun sa yo déjà gagné. Right? So the foundation is using an endowment model, right? Which is son l'autre bagay qui différemment pour nous, right? Ça veut dire que pas seulement vle m'a joindre ça besoin et puis après ça la gueule. Now endowment allows you to plant, to let it grow. And then you take the growth of it, and then c'est ça tout farmers je connais bien.
Oui, c'est ça.
Everybody who's a farmer knows that you have to planter, récolter, mais faut replanter encore, so pas replanter, so pas faire
encore. Ouais.
And that's the whole point of the foundation. It's using that model that allows us to ensure that the fund that we're going to have is not spent right away, but that the fund that we have is going to be invested and that we're using the yield of that fund to be able to support and accompany grassroots local organizations in these rural communities in this area of entrepreneurship, the environment, and civic education. Now, then this earthquake happened, right? So when it comes to earthquake relief, the fund that's being raised for earthquake relief can't go in an investment fund, right? So it absolutely has to be used right away. So what makes what we're doing a little bit different. Right? Than what others may be doing. So I took some time. As you know, I was in Haiti during the time of the earthquake. I visited all of the community, in those rural communities, about 18 of them I visited. So I can listen to what people are saying, so I can see how they're interacting, so I can see what are those community organizations that are based in these rural communities, what are they saying in terms of the kind of support that they're looking for and so forth, to really begin to think about how can we as a foundation intervene, right? Along that path. Let me give you an example as something very tangible. In the midst of this earthquake, there's a conversation about we need to ensure that everybody gets a tent, right? Because we're in the middle of, cyclone ap vini, la pluie ap tombe, faut nous assurer que tout le monde joue nos tentes.
Nous besoin housing.
Nous besoin faut nous mettre en côté. Mais ça nous-mêmes nous dit, c'est que faut tout le monde joue nos tentes. Pas nous-mêmes, non, ça nous dit, nous dit. Mais là, au temps de moun yo a parlé dans zone rurale yo, yo dit, mais qui ça ne peut faire avec tente là?
Wow.
Parce que si me joigne ni, c'est pas veut dire que moun nan pral di non l'or balin.
Mais la questionner,
mais la dit comme ça que si me joigne tente là, ou pas connaît combien moun qui nan famille. Ça veut dire ou pas venir avec une tente peut-être qui pral vraiment assez large pour tout le monde. M'gen bagay mwen yo, m'gen ti moun yo, et puis m'gen belle-mère mwen, m'gen belle tout le monde ça yo faut aller dans tente là. When am no situation côté pour I have to choose who's going.
Qui est-ce qui va dormir en bas tente, qui est-ce qui va dormir dehors?
Exactement.
En réalité ça nous va le faire. Tout le monde va dormir dehors.
Tout le monde exactement, et puis tente nous va mettre bagay nous en bas en dans tente. Ça veut dire que ça c'est un exemple. Et puis on dit bon, si c'est pas tête qui ça la piller, right? So the next level is thoughts, right? So we say, well, on n'a pas besoin pour là. Et puis tout le monde a comprendre ça. Pour là, yo a bon parce que la pierre c'est plus large pour la que mettre toute bagaille en bas, tout ça. I said, well, that sounds really, really good, right? Next thing. But the people in these communities were saying, we think we have a better idea. Que si on peut là, oui, la pierre tout, mais nous pensons que nous pouvons faire en façon différemment. Et puis, l'on regarde pour vous venir avec une idée that you can repurpose some of the materials that they have to create a temporary shelter, right? That would allow them to have the space to put their materials, get out of the rain, and it's going to be more doable, as they said, because they said the top can get a hole, the top can rip, but if we have this structure on the same space where we have our land, now we can keep that and use it as a depot. Peter, mais paysans, Naomi, même moun sa yo nous parle, right? Nous dit que
raison ça que yo évalue situation, yo cherche une solution qui est bon pour yo même.
Pour yo même. Mais est-ce que ou même au prêt pour tendre ça? Est-ce qu'on prêt pour accompagner moun nan côté lié ya? Ou est-ce que l'étape meilleure que Haiti Community Trust a fait un partnership avec une organisation locale, nous allons acheter 500 top pour là pour nous assurer nous distribuer, ou est-ce que nous allons accompagner mon local ça yo, organisation locale ça yo qui gagne de ça? Baka deux côtés nous y, nous allons suivre mon ça. C'est là nous y pour nous supporter deux communes kounia dans Lièvre qui fait partie de NIP et puis Touarak qui fait partie de Campérin, right? Pour nous accompagner organisation locale yo cap aider famille ça yo construit ça yo même yo prévoir que ça yo même yo te vle faire pour propre tête pa yo. Et ça qui bon dans tout ça c'est lui permettre que moun yo senti que y a construit un bagay pour propre tête pa yo. Ouais. C'est pas un bagay.
They're involved.
They are involved. We're talking about psychologically. Yeah. Like the kids are going to get the stuff and participating. The women's are cooking because of the, bosses are coming in to, to do this work. So now it becomes like a community event. And then people feel like they are contributing to their own well-being. And that's, what I'm talking about in terms of asset framing, when I'm talking about like connecting with what the resources are that people already have, that even in the midst of disasters, they're thinkers, and they have the abilities to think about what is it that they would like to see happen. Let's listen to what they have to say.
Dr. G, we know that you actually had the experience of being there on August 14. What happened? What did you see?
Well, let me tell you, I'm still trying to shake that experience, and I think that is an important element because I think it's like days after you still feel like you feel the shake. Right? Even though and people may say like there was an aftershock, and I was having conversations with people on the ground and they'd be like, did you feel that aftershock? Or did I feel that aftershock? But it really wasn't an aftershock really, but you felt like there was an aftershock because you had experienced it in such a way, right? So it's 8:30. We've always just had coffee. You don't expect and that's the thing about earthquake. There's no warning. Unlike cyclone,
on la
venir pour peut-être préparer, mais avec tremblement de terre, pas connaît. And that, to have waken up and to have literally the ground shaking, the walls shaking where I was, the walls were cracked, on the walls, things fell off, and then pour essayer retirer moun ti grand moun yo en de kay la pour faire sortir ça c'est un l'autre bagaille. Je dis moi même pour raison à traîner moi quand madame mademoiselle mal élevée ou traîner moi tirer dans de kay. So we had to try to really make sure that we're getting them out in a level of in a place
respectful and in a way that they are receiving.
Absolutely. So that was really like a process, and then you realize what just happened, right? And then it's when you start to go and visit other places and start to see the devastation of the road, of the mountains, I parle de terrain qui fond. It's just split. Mountains that just cut off, and tombe, on this side. You begin to see, and you go to a community and you see you can't count the number of homes that are still standing. Right, overall. And then you think of the number of people who have died, right? And you look at the devastation and you realize how much more this could have been, right? And you listen to the people in these rural communities who talk about, thank God we're farmers. And it was, Saturday, and it was market day. We were already well on our way to the market. We were already in market by 3 a.m. And so if in fact we were talking about a very different kind of location, I think the devastation in terms of human
much higher
would have been much higher, right? Much higher. And so it was really the opportunity to see all of that was really just devastating, just devastating.
Now you talked about listening to them and assessing what their particular needs may be before we act.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what else is working now.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, one of the things that I noticed that absolutely was working more, and I have to tell you, I am incredibly proud of the messaging that our folks in the diaspora were sending throughout, the larger community to say, let's not repeat some of the things that we repeated in 2010. We destabilized the economy in 2010 because we were sending out water and other stuff to the country, diapers, and so forth to the country, when the country have these things already. So when we send them for free, what happens to the company that is employing people, right? That now is not able to, keep the employees. We saw many companies that close as a result of that. That's not what we want for the country. If we want a society that's developed, we want to make sure that we're amplifying, right, what's already in the country. So really seeing the diaspora pushing for not sending water to the country, to not send goods to the country, begging people, please don't send your dirty clothes also to the country. All of that was really, really helpful, because we saw the impact of canned food. I'm pas que jusqu'à maintenant, il y a des canned food. Qui sont là depuis 2010.
Non, douane.
Oui, jusqu'à maintenant.
Qui vont go de douane.
Okay. Donc, especially when we're talking about farmers that are used to organic food, right, as well, like they eat organically.
Yeah.
And so sending out these types of food, it's not going to help in terms of their health. It's not going to help in terms of their overall digestive system and all of that, right? So I really am very proud of that. And I'm very proud of what I see is starting up right now, where I see more of this sort of like Haitian organizations are really promoting the importance of supporting local organizations in the country.
Yes.
Because we forget that there are indeed organizations that are based in the country that are absolutely able to do this work. Yes. I saw firsthand organizations that came from OCAP, that came from other departments, simply to support their own, local organizations as well. And so I think we should all celebrate that, right, as well.
That's awesome. And I know you mentioned a little bit about what is not working, but let's specifically talk about what is not working so we ensure that those that are looking to help within the diaspora send the proper help.
Yeah, right. So I do think that, and this is what we were talking about at the beginning, right? About like, am I doing something now for this moment for myself to feel good about what I'm doing, or am I doing something for the long term, right? And so if I'm coming to the country and I come with my suitcase of stuff, bam bagay ki mbap jamb liye ke mwen wè avec deux grains yeux, que moun vini nan pays ya, li de on truck nan route nationale la, et puis li gen de mbakon sa yote, mbakon se top yote, mbakon sa yoye non ti sachet, et puis la voye yo. Ou la voye yo nan la ria pour chaque grain moun kouri pour y apprendre. Ça n'a pas fait sens.
Non.
Right? Ça n'a pas fait sens parce que il n'y a pas rien de dignité. La donne, il n'a pas fait sens à propos de l'humanité. Faut penser bien, est-ce que si ça c'est grand moins, est-ce que c'est comme ça que tu as voulu traiter? There's some of these methods and these strategies of coming in and we're just going to have somebody standing on a line so they can hold a bowl. So you can give them some food.
And you can take a picture.
So you can take a picture and video and put it on social media. That's not the way that those are not methods that are going to lead to long-term, right? Development and so forth. So we have to, we still have to correct some of those methods and some of those strategies. They're sort of like running to do something so I can say I was there. So I can say I did something. So I can, right? But then when we look 3 years later, where are we? Right? And so forth. So, kwenye m'a dit tout moun pour moi-même que m'pense que l'est arrivé pour nous pas pipi gaye. Et ça m'a dit tout moun kwenye m'a besoin pipi concentré. I'm serious. We can't just be spreading all over, right? Whatever you have. And that's what we do is sort of like, whatever it is I have, I'm going to spread it out to as many people as possible. So then I can look at all the things that I'm doing versus being able to say, bon, rete la. Well, how great would it be that I'm going to accompany this family And I'm going to do this work with this family from the time of this relief to recovery, have the kids back to school.
M'assurer que vous arrivez là.
Là. Ouais, ça mais ça pas, it doesn't have the same sexiness.
I was just about to say that's not sexy.
Okay, you know, because it doesn't have.
It may not get you a lot of likes.
Parce que ou pas get toute photo yo, ça m'a montré un grain, ouais. Mais that's much more effective. That's much more impactful, right? Overall. So I'm really, you know, I think we have an opportunity, right? We have an opportunity not only right now to think about this disaster, because the next one is around the corner. And the question is how we are preparing ourselves, or how we're preparing and working with our communities, accompanying our communities to prepare for the next event, right? That's about to come. And I think that's where we really need to spend the time, right? To really think a little bit about, you know, our strategies.
Dr. G, you've traveled throughout the globe. You talked about visiting Africa. You talked about going to Brazil. You talked about St. Croix. Let's talk about the 10,000 organizations that are currently in Haiti that claim they're there to do a good work. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I have to tell you, I don't think they're 10,000 anymore, just to be clear, because I think they gave that report after the earthquake. But one of the things that we noticed, which is exactly what tends to happen, is that when there's a disaster in the country, people come. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're there for the long haul, right? Okay. So I can only be there until my money runs out.
Oui.
Hey, l'argent fini, faut me retourner côté.
Baquet valise.
From paquet pour m'aller, right? So what we begin to see is that 10,000 dwindle until there's another disaster and I'm able to get some funds. Now I'm retourner encore, right? And so that's the process and that's the method that does not lead to development. So how different would that be if in fact I want to focus on health, right? I want to focus on health in the midst of this disaster and so forth. Instead of packing 4 or 5 people, now I have to find a place for those people. We have to get a car. We have to get a driver. We have to get all this thing. And when you have chien, if I'm going chien, buy chien, okay? So you have to have all of these things. Instead of using the funds for all of that, how great would it be if you partnered with Zami La Santé? That's on the ground, right? Or you're interested in art and culture and you partner with Focal. That's on the ground. That's doing art and, you know, to say, we're going to partner. But since you're already on the ground, you're already doing that work, right? How do we support those organizations that are already on the ground, right? For the long term, because they will continue to be there. When you run out of money, they still will be on the ground, right? So that kind of partnership, collaborating and partnering with local organizations that are registered, that are Haitian-led. And I'm telling people, pay attention to this Haitian-led because we need to vet them. As a foundation, we vet these organizations. And what we are learning is, even though they're in country, they are led by a board that's in Colorado. Wow. Right? And so we have to pay attention to whether or not is this organization really truly a Haitian organization, Haitian-led organization, or it just happen to be in country, right? Overall. So really, you know, making sure that we're vetting those organizations and building those partnerships and so forth with organizations is really important. I'm not here to have a conversation with you to tell people about the importance of Ayiti Community Trust. I am here. I promote Focal, Zami La Santé, as much as I would talk about Ayiti Community Trust, because I am invested in ensuring that we are supporting and strengthening our local organizations to be able to do the work that needs to happen on the ground. The process and the methods that we've done over the last couple of years is not effective. You coming from Miami, Colorado, Chicago, pour 1 semaine, 2 semaines, pas avancer pays dans façon que le supposé aller. Et nous connaissons des organisations ça yo qu'on pays plus que nous-mêmes. En nous clair, même si me parle langue là moi connais que les montré, mal parler, même avec famille, je dis, ah, mais madame n'a vini, et même blanc retourné. Même blanc, ouais. So we have to recognize that even though I was born and that's my country and I'm there every month and so forth, there are still people in the country that understand the country as, you know, as we should. So we really need to really make sure that we are supporting our local organizations that are on the ground, because they absolutely can get things done if they have the right support to do so.
And to your point, I recently saw a report where Focal really, with full transparency, showed how much money que yon entre, ça yon fait à Kobla, côté l'aller. Donc, nous avons responsabilité pour nous vraiment commencer trust, une lot. Pas vrai, et accepter que m'pa connaît, ça m'pa connaît.
Exactement.
Et si moun nan la déjà, moun nan fait travail là, at the end of the day, I am doing myself and the people justice by working alongside them.
Exactly. And it really is important. I mean, I know that you've heard me say this a lot. Trust is an equation. It's not do I have it, don't I have it. Right? Which means that I'm saying that because it means we're going to have a level of patience in what is it that we're building. So when I say, do I trust you, don't trust you, it sounds like dichotomous. It sounds like, est-ce que me fais confiance ou pas fais confiance? C'est comme si oui ou non. Mais trust is an equation. It is credibility. So est-ce que maudit, ça qui sorti dans bouche, est-ce que li vérité? Est-ce que me ka kwel? Ça, c'est credibility. Plus reliability. Est-ce que ça m'doulan, est-ce que consistant? Est-ce que son bagay me fait pour le moment, m'a fait li, ou est-ce que demain, si je vais me faire même bagay là, me faire même bagay là, me faire janté ou me faire lundi, c'est comme ça me va le faire le mardi, c'est comme ça me va le faire mercredi. Ça veut dire que ça, c'est consistant. Ça, c'est reliability. See? Credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. Right? Intimacy. And intimacy is whether or not m'passe temps avec vous. Right? Est-ce que m'connecter avec non quelle façon? M'pa ka faire moun nan confiance si m'pa même gen chance pour moi ou. M'pa passer temps avec, m'pa konn ki moun ouye, m'pa konn ki so fait. Right? Tout ça. Ça veut dire que là n'a parlé de aspect de confiance là, quelquefois n'a parlé est-ce que moun nan crédible.
D'accord.
Ouais? Mais peut-être ou regarder, il pas crédible mais il consistant. Il pas crédible, mais il toujours vin wow, il toujours relé ou, il toujours fait tel bagay. Ça veut dire que trust li, ka un peu, pas wow, mais il pas baba. Mais moun qui pas gain, ni crédibilité, li pas consistant, ça veut dire que pas reliable. On parle de reliable, l'aime d'où, pour venir à 3 et pour venir à 4, ça pas mettre ouais, ou pas reliable, pas ka trust, est-ce qu'on va venir à l'heure. Ouais, je nous ka dit trust là, mais c'est trust à propos de reliability. Right? Et puis, l'autre là, c'est l'aspect de connexion. Donc, ça veut dire que, faut nous prendre un petit temps. Là, on a parlé de focal, de amis, la santé, des fonds causés. Est-ce que m'ka trust yo? Haiti Community Trust, est-ce que m'ka trust? M'di, ou pas qu'on aime. Si ou pas qu'on aime, ou pas prendre temps pour tendre ça m'a dit, ou pas ouais, qui j'en va développer ça. Donc, ça veut dire que, faut nous gon aspect de compassion, right? We have to have a level of compassion and grace, right?
Give us a little grace.
Right? So that you can really build the sense of trust that we're talking about. And it's one of the reasons why we call Haiti Community Trust, because not only because trust has a financial component to it, but it also has this aspects of this is going to take some time, right? And so our focus in Haiti Community Trust is to show you that consistently, we will do what we say we're doing is exactly what we say. How I speak and how we speak about what we're doing will be consistent, and that we want to spend the time to really, be connected to people and so forth. So let's really take the time to really work on these things, right? Work on these things so that we can absolutely develop more of that sense of trust in one another to be able to move forward with some of the things we want to do.
Dr. G, earlier you talked a little bit about the endowment model. I just would love for our viewers to really understand the endowment model and how it works. You talked about investment, and some people are saying, wait, is it nonprofit? What is it? Please explain that to us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So most universities, as probably most of your viewers know, are based on an endowment model, right? So that means that and most people, pense que la caillou, c'est ça nous voulons faire. Après, m connais grand moi t'es toujours gen ba ça grand moi t'es toujours gon côté libre réservé on bagay avec la serré m pense jusqu'à maintenant madame la pas là toujours même m pense gon côté gon bagay qui serré that means like this idea of how do I take what I'm given today and in it I don't spend it all, right? So I'm going to take, if you give me $1 and out of that $1, I'm going to take 70 cents of that $1 and I'm going to invest it. I'm going to put it on côté qui ka fait petit. Ma prend 30 centimes là pour me faire pour me dépenser le temps. So kounya 70 centimes ça mette que me pral mettre non investment pool permettre que li ban moins on ti bagay la donne. Ça veut dire que le parité 70 centimes. Li augmenter un petit peu. Kounya nou in the market right now, if you talk to all of your wealth advisors, they talk about 5%. 3 to 5% is what you can yield. So for us, if we have a $20 million endowment, right, and we put that in an investment pool, it's going to yield us about $1 million a year. And it's $1 million a year consistently forever and ever and ever and ever, because we never touching the principle of it. And you just keep on building it and you keep building. So the more you build that endowment, the more it's going to yield you. So if we go from a $20 million endowment to a $50 million endowment, that's even more fun that you get a chance to have. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of building for the future. Parce que nous créer Haiti Community Trust parce que petite Naomi pral vin membre là. Parce que là pour tout temps ça. Petite tout pas là, peut-être Naomi pas là. Even if you're not there, but this fund is always going to be there to do this kind of work, right? For the long term. And that's the cool thing about to have like the endowment model. And I think that's what makes this different than being able to just take
a regular
fund.
nonprofit that you give them the money, you donate. Once they go through their expenses, the money's gone. Next year, it's...
You have to be back at it again.
Back at it again. So we have to really, it's sort of like, how do I have funds? But I think of what is it that I'm saving for the future? So that model, we're really hoping not only do we do it for the foundation, but that it's also a model that you're putting in terms of your own personal life, right? Of course. Right? To ensure that there's going to be some fund that are going to be there for the long term, because even at this particular moment, as we're thinking about this disaster, in our mind, it can't be how we're doing an earthquake relief fund now, but it's how we're having a disaster fund for the future, because the next disasters that's going to come around the corner, it shouldn't be that we are dependent on a fund, right? Faut que nous préparer. You know, it's such an amazing point that you just made. Faut que nous préparer nous. Parce que première fois en 2010, c'est première fois moi-même font une expérience avec un earthquake en Haïti. Mais qu'on y a là en 2021, m'baka dit c'est première fois encore.
Exactement.
So ça veut dire comme ça que si c'est pas première fois encore, qui j'aime te préparer moins pour ça qui va venir, et nous déjà, I mean, we all have the understanding based on where Haiti's located. There's the Fort Line. It's not if. It's when.
Yeah.
So ça veut dire comme ça que nous avons responsabilité.
Exactement.
Exactement. Dr. G, in administering any initiative for the masses, historically, can you think of an example of one that has worked well, or maybe one that may not have worked all together well, but maybe we can build upon?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because, when I was in Ayiti this last time, we taking a look to see, what are some of the things in this rural community that seem to still be standing, right? And so forth, in terms of, even when we're thinking about building and so forth, right, as well. So one of the things I learned is that there's like many homes down, but there were some that were still standing, I was like, well, what is that about? Right? So I wanted to go in, I wanted to see, I asked, I wanted to really understand. But there's a way that some were building that were a little bit different. And I have to tell you, I'm going to give a shout out to Habitat for Humanity, because the Habitat for Humanity homes were standing in the South, in the midst of that. And so I say that to say there's some lessons learned. Yes. There's an opportunity to say, even in the midst of all of that, to say, what seemed to have still be standing in the midst of this massive earthquake? And the question is like, how do you scale that up? How do you take what's working, scale it up for what to come, and duplicate it, for the future? So there are some things that are working. Let's just make them work.
Et puis c'est fini, oui. Nous faisons pas la complicated.
Nous faisons la tout compliqué.
Pour rien.
Rien, so.
Dr. G, it was a pleasure having you. I often say to you all the time, I need a session. And indeed, today was a great session. Yeah. Please share with the viewers, where can they go to donate to Ayiti Community Trust?
So thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation to be with you today. It's always wonderful to sit with you and have a conversation with you, right? It was really, really, really awesome to have an opportunity to do this. So thank you for the invitation. And so we use the word contribute. We use the word invest. And so people can absolutely go to Ayiti Community Trust, and we say Ayiti because that is our name. We are reclaiming our identity because that is who we are. As a country. So it's AyitiCommunityTrust.org. They go there, they will find, lots of information about what we do and the work that we are doing in terms of our grant making programs, our program, our, the earthquake relief fund that was launched, and they can absolutely contribute and invest in the country.
Guys, there you have it. Thank you so very much for tuning into Conversations. My name is Naomi Blemur, and I am your host. Listen, the conversation does not stop here. The conversation continues with your friends. It continues with your family. And to the extent that you cannot agree, let's learn how to agree to disagree. Until next time, have a great day. Hi, my name is Naomi Blemur, author, coach, and businesswoman. I am here in our magnificent space, Balancing Life Workspace. Today is just an amazing day for us as an organization, for our vision and the trajectory of our future. Balancing Life Workspace is a space designed with you in mind. We've created a space where you can connect, create, and cultivate. It is an affordable workspace for the freelancer, for the independent contractor, for the startup, or for the person who's looking to downsize. Wherever you are in your vision, wherever you are in your entrepreneurship, come check us out and see whether or not our space can provide services to you. Thank you.
Schedule your private tour for North Miami's very first co-working space today. We are located at 685 Northeast 126th Street on the corner of 126th and 7th Ave, just minutes from City Hall. For plans and pricing, visit our site at www.blworkspaces.com or call us Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 6 p.m. at 305-735-2105. Until then, have a balanced day.